My guest for the second episode of the Engel Angle is retired DFW sports journalist and full-time legend, Mr. Randy Galloway. Now, before I get to him, I do want to share with you a story or stories. Now, I could fill a few podcasts with Randy Galloway stories. And people have asked me over the years what Randy Galloway is really like. And they can't believe my answer, because I think it's almost as if they don't want to believe my answer when I say that Randy is the best, that he's the greatest guy, and he is the person you hope he would be when you meet him. And you can't always say that about that sort of famous person when you meet him. But Randy, I am happy to say, is very much that. His wife, Janine, their two daughters, their grandchildren, all of them are just terrific people. And I don't have enough, I don't have the vocabulary to express my appreciation for Randy and his family. But there's a lot of fun stories that I've got about Randy, and I wrote a few of them down. One of them was in 2005 when we were in Jacksonville, Florida, and he and I were driving to a Cowboys game against the Jaguars. Now, I'm not going to try to emulate Randy's voice, because the only guy who can do that is actor Sam Elliott, and I do not have Sam Elliott's voice. So Randy says, we need to go to a gas station before we actually go to the stadium. Now, I know he doesn't need cigars because I can see him there in his bag. Now, Randy would chew on cigars during the game. He wouldn't smoke them. He would chew them. And he would chew them all the way down to the nub. So as he was getting near to the end of the cigar, he would take the little sticker off near the bottom so he could continue to chew on it and casually spit it out into a cup right next to his computer. So we go to the gas station, and he buys a styrofoam cooler, a 12-pack of Miller Lite, and a bag of ice. Throw all of them in the cooler, throw them in the trunk, go to the game. Game ends. He finishes writing his column, and he and our colleague at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram at the time, the equally great Jim Reeves, they both retreat to the parking lot, and Randy yells at all of us to hurry up. Randy yells at us a lot, but he was yelling at us to hurry up and get done. So about 30 minutes later, I hurry up and I get done, and I go down to the parking lot. Parking lot's dead empty, and there are Randy and Jim Reeves crushing Miller Lights just standing next to the car. Randy says, Matt, get a beer. I reach into the cooler. It's been 30 minutes, and I reach into that cooler. There are 2 Miller Lights left. We go back to the hotel. What do? Go to the bar. What's Randy do? Orders a Miller Lite. A few years later, we're in San Diego, California, after the Cowboys, of course, lost to the Chargers. He asks me for a ride to his hotel. Randy didn't like to drive. He always had a driver. In this case, I was the driver. So we're walking towards the car, and he starts kind of talking to himself, a little bit to me, but he kind of wonders aloud how much longer he can do this job, because he'd been in the job for decades. And he says, how many different ways can I rip Jerry Jones? And to credit Randy, he always found a different way to rip Jerry Jones. So in 2007, the Cowboys had a preseason game in Houston, and neither Randy nor myself wanted to stay the night in Houston, so we agreed that we would drive the day of the game. He picks me up at 11 a.m., drive for a few hours, stop for lunch at a Mexican restaurant in some little town, get to the game at 5. Randy liked to be early at events. He did not like to cut it close. He wanted to be there early so he could spread out the newspaper and read and, have his time. Cover the game, do our jobs, get in the car at 11, head back to Fort Worth. So that's about 9 hours total we're in the car together. And in those 9 hours, I maybe said 200 words, probably less. We didn't listen to the radio. There were no podcasts. We did not have, Sirius or XM. We had Randy, and Randy talked the entire time with no commercial breaks. It was riveting material, too. And my only regret is that I did not record it. Well, we were in Port Charlotte, Florida. This was back in 2002, and we're covering the Texas Rangers during spring training. And Randy, not a lot of people know this, but Randy back in the day was a jogger. That was his main mode of exercise, was jogging. And on this morning, he was not a jogger. So he doesn't get to the clubhouse until he finally arrives a little bit later. And he said, I was going to go for a jog this morning, but I went and got donuts instead. There are a lot of other stories that I'm sure I'm forgetting, but the one that sticks out the most to me is the day when I met Randy back in sometime in 1999-ish. Now, at the time, I was so far down the totem pole, I could not be located with a team of scientists. And I met Randy, who at the time was very much in the prime of his career and easily the biggest sports personality in all of Texas and maybe the American Southwest, because he had such a prominent column at the Dallas Morning News and then the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and he owned sports talk radio airwaves for so long. Randy didn't know me, but he treated me like a pro, and the same way he would treat anybody else. And when you're such a nobody, and then the somebody in the room treats you like a colleague and a friend, you never forget it. One other thing about Randy that he does, even to this day, is how he manages to give everyone his time, which in his position is a lot harder than you might think. We would be out and people would recognize Randy and they'd want to talk to him. They want to stop him and get his time. And Randy never big-timed anybody. He never hid in a booth. He never ducked any potential conversation with anybody. He always stood right in the middle of the bar. So people would come up to him and they'd want to talk sports. They wanted to hear that voice, and he always did it. He never brushed them off. He never ignored anyone, because they were readers, they were listeners, they were customers, and they all knew in that moment they mattered to him. And he had this way of giving them their time, of acknowledging them, and then ending the conversation, so he knew he appreciated them, but he also had other things. That kind of time, that breeds loyalty and customer satisfaction because it's so genuine and authentic. I don't know how to thank Randy Galloway, and I speak on behalf of so many people in North Texas whom he has been so generous to. I don't know how to thank him for all he did for me, my spouse, and so many other people. But I am no different than so many other people over the years who worked with Randy. All of us have our stories of a man who, after he was born, God said, "I'm not doing that one again." So rather than me blather on with stories, enjoy the voice and a few more stories from himself, the great Randy Galloway. How long have you been out?
Retired off the radio in 2013, and the newspaper too. And they came to me, Celeste comes to me and said, "Randy, they want to talk to you about doing a call every Sunday." I went, "Celeste, that'd be like working." I would still be worried all week when you
right.
Right on Friday, and then we got down to 30 columns.
30 columns a year.
30 columns, and most of them in football.
Right.
Most all of them were saved for football. 30 Sunday, but really you could say retired in 13. And so I've been retired, 8 years.
Did you miss it? When you ultimately did leave, did you have withdrawals, any of those sort of stereotypes or cliches?
I've had testimony from my wife, son-in-law, daughter, multiple friends. They all have apologized to me because they thought that I would go absolutely nuts in retirement, and I told them I would not, that I was looking forward to it. And now that they all had to come back and say they were wrong, I haven't missed it any. Just no, I never even a thought about going back, and I tell you why. Because the newspaper and the radio, same thing. Once one column is over, anybody who does this, you're going, all right, what's the next one? One radio show is over, oh God, what are we going to do tomorrow? What's coming up? What do we got? Is there anything happening out there? That became, for basically 30 years, because the last 29 years I was doing both radio and newspaper. And so for 29 years I was going through this year round. What's next? It is so damn good not to have to worry about what's next. And every once in a while a story will pop and I'll go, I kind of wish I had a column on that one.
Like what? Give me an example of something.
The prime example Cowboy game against the 49ers.
Yeah.
The playoff game. And I have never seen a more undisciplined. To be that, and by the way, it wasn't the first time that ever happened. It's been going on all season.
Right.
But I'm thinking, you know, if you're that undisciplined, there's three things that are involved. You either don't give a damn, or you're just stupid, or you're not well coached. And it may be all three, by the way, involved with this Cowboy team. But I've never seen a team that stupid.
You've covered a lot of stupid Cowboy teams.
And I have. And I was thinking back on, I've covered a lot of bad Cowboy teams, but I don't ever remember saying, boy, they're just stupid. I remember saying they're not very good. And that was going back to the Tom Landry years.
Yeah.
And certainly in some of those, a lot of those Jerry years after Jimmy left. We know what was going on with that. But, yeah, that'd be one prime example. Damn, I wish I'd be ripped. But I will say this. I think that the Mac Engels and certainly Kevin Sherrington in the morning, I think they handled it well. So
thank you.
Okay, it was handled well.
Okay.
The rip jobs were handled well and appropriate, and so I moved up.
I heard David Letterman say this a couple years after he retired, which was he looked back at the end of his career and he said, I should have retired 10 years ago, but nobody told me. Did you ever have a moment where you thought, why didn't I retire 5 years ago? Why did I wait to do this?
Now, on that part, I never did.
You never did?
And I went beyond. I always said, I'm not going to be riding to college when I'm 66 years old.
Right.
I'm not going to be doing a damn radio show 3 hours a day when I'm 66 years old. So 65 was my retirement date. You get to 65, the money's great, and I liked it. I was still, boom. And then you have a wife. She's going, hey, I like this money coming to me. So yeah, that's what it's all about, right? And it's the same. It was the same for me. Main thing was you still enjoy it, and I did. But I will. So I said I'm going to go a couple of years. And then it was a couple more. So when I got to 69, I said, this is the last year. Period. I don't think anybody believed that. But I said I'll be 70, boom, I'm out. And it was time then. It was time. Probably the last year, I'm figuring I'll be having this over.
No.
But I did go beyond that 65 where I said I'd never work. But I enjoyed most all of that, going to 70. And but I've never had any regrets about retirement.
I asked Dan Jenkins one time, God rest his soul, did you ever write anything where you thought, oh man, I was too mean, I was too nasty, I was too whatever? And he said, yeah, there were some times I drew too much blood. Did you ever I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did you ever write or say anything where you're like, ooh, I went over the line on that one?
Too many times.
Did you?
And I would go, and people would say that. I mean, my wife again, she'd be ready to go. She'd say, God, that is too hard. I thought it was great at the time I wrote it. I was really pleased about getting that thing rushed.
Yeah.
And getting it in the paper, boom, boom, boom. And then you read it and you go, I wish an editor would call me. And by the way, you want an editor to call Randy, could you soften that up? And many times, it didn't get in the paper, or it was softened up because editors didn't call. And that was when I was at the Morning News. It was when I was at the Star Television too. So
did you ever have any? Because there was a confrontation I heard that you had one time with Deion Sanders in the locker room. Well, I never asked you that. What was that story?
This was my introduction to CNN. It was 95, whatever year Deion came, and I wasn't worshiping I thought it was a good move to bring him in, but I wasn't worshiping at the Deion throne. But hey, okay, that's good cornerback, good coverage guy. Well, as the season went on there, that first season he was with the Cowboys, I went, this guy's the most selfish guy I've ever seen. I thought he was a racist too. And in the reverse kind of way, of course. But, and there were several incidents involved there that kind of proved that, but okay. I wasn't rushing to him after a game for any quotes. Then I read, Cowboys had lost a game on the road, and I'm reading the papers the next day, and one of our sidebar men, I was at the morning news then, had a quote from Deion. They can't blame the defense on this one today. That just kind of pissed me off. So I confronted him right there, Monday afternoon, right there in the locker room, old Valley Ranch, and he goes off, and then we're back and forth, boom, 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 boom. He goes off, I go, nah, it didn't ever come to blows, didn't even come close. Well, I didn't want to get my ass whooped, so I'm glad it didn't come to blows, but it was loud. And okay, so, but I covered baseball for 10 years, the Rangers, and that can be very common in the clubhouse, a baseball clubhouse, major league clubhouse. So I'd had my fair share of those, so didn't think that much about it. Well, I started getting calls. This was Tuesday. Friends of mine in the media, kind of all over the country. I bet I got 5 or 6. God, I saw you last night. I said, what? Yeah, I saw you last night on CNN. I didn't even know we had CNN at the time. And again, after about the 5th call, I'm going, damn. Everybody's going, saw you on CNN. I looked it up. Oh, wait a minute, we've got CNN. I just never had gone to the channel. Yeah, had never watched it. And I never did see, but a CNN camera crew were in there and reporter. They saw this happening. They filmed it. They put it on CNN. I said, the world has just changed. It has just, I wasn't even going to write about it. It wasn't that big a deal. And probably nobody else would have written about it, I don't think. But it wasn't that big a deal. But the CNN, then 3 months later, I go to spring training in Florida, Rangers. I had 10 players come up. God, that was great. That was great. You and Deion Sanders going at it. 10 players. I'm going, this CNN's going to be pretty big. Because these guys were living all over the country, from California to North Carolina. And so I guess that was my most famous back and forth verbal dispute, because it went on CNN.
You covered President Bush before he was the governor.
Oh,
he
sure.
was a general managing partner of the Rangers.
Yeah.
So then, obviously, his career changes a lot. He's the president of the United States near the end of his tenure. His PR guy, longtime DFW sports guy, Kevin Sullivan, says, Randy, he wants you to come up here. And you go up there during a Cowboys road trip, and you're in the Oval Office, and you're seeing the guy that you knew as George.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever. I talked to Kevin Sullivan about it, but what was that experience? Had to be a blast for you to take your family, your grandkids, and you're in the White House with the president.
Well, you got to go back to like October of that year, and this is going to be, of course, President Bush is lamed up,
right?
And so I'm doing what the ESPN called the 5,000th radio show, which was BS. I hadn't done 5,000, and I'm in an argument with them over there. No, it's good publicity.
Right.
And I figured it out. I'd probably done about 3,500 radio shows.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'd started.
So the whole thing was just a gimmick?
Oh, it was a gimmick.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, hell yeah. And I liked the program director so much, Tom Lee, and he loved the idea that I went ahead and went with it. And Tom said, well, you personally have done like 3,500 radio shows. That's what you figure. How about this? You've done so many interviews with other radio people, I bet it would add up to it. And I went, that's BS too. I had done 25 or 1,500. But anyway, so this is a radio show. It was a nice deal. And, a lot of people show up. Well, they had President Bush calling in from the White House. And we're talking,
Did you believe it, or did you think it was an impersonation?
At first I thought it was, some guy that could talk like I thought it was the fake President Bush. And then it hit me, that's real. And which was a great honor. I mean, my God, he calls in, but he was on 5, 6, 7 minutes. And at the end of it, he said, Randy, I want you and your family to come to the White House, be in the Oval Office. I said, boy, that's a great invitation. He hangs up. After the radio show, said, well, are you going to the White House? I said, that's kind of BS. I mean,
you didn't even buy it.
I thought he was being nice.
Yeah.
A very nice thing to do. Well, then his PR man, Kevin Sullivan, about a month later, called and said, Randy, President Bush is serious. He wants you to bring the whole family and come to Washington, D.C. I'm going, oh. So I get it. Of course, everybody's excited. So the Cowboys are playing in Pittsburgh.
That's right.
We flew into Washington on a Friday. Whole family, 10 of us. Grandkids. Sadie, who's now a sophomore in high school, she wasn't even quite 2. She was running all over the place. And, I mean, it's like the damnedest experience in the world. And we had clearance. You go in a certain entrance on that was on a Friday. And you go in a certain entrance, and then they take you into the room outside the Oval Office that you see on TV all the time. That's where head of states come in. It's a long room with a very long table. We sit there. There's Secret Service guys outside all doors, and then they come and get you, and you walk in the famous Oval Office.
What was the room like?
10 is. It was. I'm thinking there's going to be all kind of security. One guy outside, we walk in, it's us, 10 of us, 4 grandkids, 2 daughters, 2 son-in-laws. We walk in, and there's one guy, the personal president, the personal photographer for the president. And we got all these great pictures, I mean, my God. So here it is, in the famous desk.
Yep.
And he starts asking Bo's in like the 4th grade.
Was the president there when you walked in?
Yes,
he
was waiting on us.
Oh, he was waiting, okay.
Get in here, Galloway. So I had to ask Sully. I said, Sully, what do you call him? I asked Tom Schieffer, too, who had been Bismarck. I said, what do you call George now? He said, Mr. President. I said, all right. So I'm going, Mr. President, how you doing? And I told everybody, he's Mr. President. Not Mr. Bush, he's Mr. President. Okay, they got all that. So we're talking, and he's asking Bo questions. Why is that? Because Bo in 5th grade or something, he'd obviously been on the computer. He knew everything about the damn Oval Office.
Do you really?
And President Bush is going, why is the front desk, why is that covered? Bo. And I did know the answer to that. FDR had polio and was crippled, and they put that front desk.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that part.
See,
okay.
he knew. I actually knew that one, but Bo knew it right away. Bo's answering all the questions about the Oval Office. Well, I'm going, and I'd asked Sully about it. I said, Sully, when do we leave? When do we know to leave? I was hoping Sully would be there. He went, no, I'm out of town. You're on your own. And I'm going, God. He said, you'll know. You'll know. So I'm kind of watching the clock, and it's 5 minutes. We'd been in there 5, 6 minutes, and I went, Mr. President, this is great. And he went, oh, no. I'm kind of getting up to leave. No, I've got other stuff to show you. And we're going around the Oval Office looking at the pictures and other things that are happening. And then probably about 3 or 4 minutes after that, he said, tell you what, y'all, he gave me the sign.
Yeah.
He said, I want y'all, don't go out the way you came in. You go right down out that door and go over there, and the White House is right over there. He said, we're having a Red Cross reception in the White House. He said, y'all just join in like like you belong in there. So we walk out, and it's the Rose Garden, the famous path from the Oval Office to the White House. We're walking right down that thing. We walk in, and there's people everywhere.
Packed.
It wasn't, it wasn't like there's a lot of people in there, but you had room. Well, he said, go to every room, look around, enjoy the White House.
And these aren't the rooms that normally are on the tour, which is like 15, 20 minutes. You're seeing more rooms than that, right?
And here's what we saw, this layout of food. Shrimp, oysters, great layout of food. Well, he said, enjoy everything. We go get in line. We're eating, and then we're still touring and looking around. And no, there's no guide or anything, And then here comes President Bush with Mrs. Bush now.
And you knew that, right?
Yeah. And I didn't even see him, but they were kind of coming up behind him. And he screams, that's probably at least 6 Secret Service guys with him. And he screams, there's the Galloway. So I turn around, and it's Bush. It's President Bush. And so, anyway, so the next day, we go, nobody had ever been to Washington, or most of the grandkids had. So the next day, on Saturday, we tour all the
Smithsonian.
They go there, except about 4 o'clock, they took me to the train station. And then I took a 12-hour train ride to Pittsburgh.
So I remember when you got there.
Yeah, got in about midnight. Yep. It wasn't last call yet, thank God.
You did an interview one time you referenced on your old radio show. It was early 70s, you were at the morning news, and Muhammad Ali's getting ready for a fight. And you got to talk to Muhammad Ali, I think while he was sitting at a piano in a hotel? Is that wrong?
No.
Or was it just his room?
I am at Walter Robinson's Sports Center. It is hotter than hell, and I need to look this up, because this is that may be like, well, it's hard to beat the Oval Office.
Yeah.
But when it comes just to an interview with a guy, this Ali thing, he was back from some fight, one of the Frazier fights.
Okay.
Now, he had taken the championship back. This had to be 69, 70,
So he's still in his prime.
He is still
post-Vietnam.
He had beaten all the Vietnam stuff. He didn't have to go to prison, and he's back from one of the fights. And Walter calls me in. He said, "What are you doing Saturday?" And I said, "Well, I'm this or that." He said, "I got something for you to do." And Walter was not a big fan. He still called him Cassius Clay. Walter was not a big fan of greatest human being going, my first sports editor, but he said he wasn't a big fan of Cassius Clay. He said, "Look, he's a heavyweight champion. He's in town, and I want you to go in and do the interview." And I went, "Yeah, hell yeah, I'm up for that." And so I said, "Where is it?" He said, "It's at this mosque."
In Dallas?
In South Dallas.
Okay.
And it was just off what is now Martin Luther, it used to be Forest Avenue, just off the street, just off there. Well, the mosque was a house, as it turned out, right on the corner. Well, I'm in I had a 64 Falcon, had no AC, needed oil change, it's smoking a little bit. And I come driving up, I got the address, I found it, parked right in front of the mosque, nobody else there, and there's 3 or 4 brothers on the front porch. They're in suits, just like you've seen the pictures. They're in black suits, black ties, white shirts, and very close-knit, close-cut haircuts, and sunglasses.
Is it intimidating?
And they were the meanest things I've ever seen in my life. So now I have put on a suit because we were going in a church. So I put on a suit. I I go, get out of the car, and they're looking at this car like, who is this guy? Walk up and identified myself. Couldn't have been more friendly. Come right in, sister, whatever, somebody will take care of you. They open the door, I walk in, and two other women, sister, somebody, and two other women came up. Glad to have you here. Thank you very much.
You're the only white guy there.
I'm the only guy there, only
really?
person
Okay.
there. Now, had they had the African American media that we had in Dallas and Fort Worth at that time, had they been there earlier? I don't know.
Oh,
but
first.
everybody was invited. 4 newspapers with the Fort Worth Press, the 2 Fort Worth papers, 2 Dallas papers, our 4 TV stations. Everybody was invited to this thing. I'm the only one there. I'm looking around. And they said, here, go in this room, wait, what do you need? What do you need to drink? Here's some snacks, and the champ will be in. I'm sitting in there by myself. There was no other media person there. Door opens, here comes the champ. How you doing? Hey. I'm going, so, this is weird and great at the same time. He and I sat there and talked for probably about 20 minutes.
How was he?
Couldn't have been nicer, funny, and it was just like, he'd get up and do a little shuffle.
So he performed.
Oh yeah, he'd get up when he was talking. He said, I hit him like this. I got him like that. We talked a little bit about the Army thing. He was very, he said, hey, I'm just ecstatic to have that behind me. I thought I was right, and told the deal. Then after about 20 minutes, I figured that's time. I didn't want to just be there all day. So I didn't have a tape recorder. I was taking everything down on a notepad. And I didn't have the tape recorder. I didn't like to work those tape recorders. I go back to the office and I tell John Barker, I said, John, this is a hell of a story. And I tell him a story. He said, write it. I sit there, morning news sports, bang, bang, bang. Hand it to him. It's about 6 o'clock. I'm headed back for Grand Prairie. I said, John, it was good. I pick up the paper the next morning, the Sunday paper. The story, I'm looking for the story. It's got to be on page 1 of sports. I'm thumbing through, page 6, 7. And I went, damn.
You get an exclusive with Muhammad Ali. They put it on page 6.
Like I told you, this was 1969, 1970.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it racism, but there was, I'd have to call it some race. But these were good guys I was working with. Well, I wasn't that, at that time, I had been at the morning news about 4 years.
How old were you?
I was about 26 at the time. I'd been there, so I'm not like I would have later. I would have gone in screaming, throwing stuff. What in the hell that we played that story? I just walk in and Walt calls me over. He said, I want to apologize to you. He said, I gave the order. I don't like the son of a bitch. He skipped his service duty when all these other kids are going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I said, Walt, I got out of Vietnam too on a hernia.
Is that right?
Yeah, I did. That's how I thought I was going. But I got out on a hernia. He said, well, that's legitimate. That's medical. I said, well, if I really want to go, I could have got that hernia fixed, waited about 9 months, and they would have taken me. He said, okay, that's the point. But he went, I told him to play that story there. And I regretted it when I picked up the paper Sunday. He said, so don't blame Jabbo, it's John Barker. And I said, well, I wasn't blaming him anyway. I figured you were the one. He said that story should have been on page 1. And I wish I'd have saved that story.
Oh, I'll find that.
Yeah, I got a lot of columns that I wish I'd have done, and it wasn't really that long, maybe 18 inches. So, I mean, it wasn't like there was some, because I knew better than to, really try to blow it out. I knew they weren't. And by the way, at that time, it's the summertime in Dallas. We had no Major League Baseball. We had no NBA. We had no hockey.
You had the Cowboys.
We had the Cowboys. And of course, this was their off season. So it wasn't like we were just loaded up.
You mentioned one time to me when I covered baseball, you guys, and I read it one time, it was one of my favorite things. And there's so many things of yours I can still quote. The Cowboys signed Tony Banks, loser signed loser.
Yeah.
And the Cowboys lost to the Texans in the first game. Fight owner deport him. I can still quote those.
Yeah.
But you wrote the obit when Ted Williams died. You were on vacation and you wrote the obit when Ted Williams died because you got to cover Ted in his first year.
Absolutely.
And it sounded like the one part of it I couldn't understand was why would Ted Williams take on that job? Come to Texas. It wasn't an expansion team, but it was essentially an expansion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was the worst team in the league.
Why would he take on that job where he knew he was going to lose 100 games?
Yeah, and it may have been a financial attachment. I mean, Ted was it wasn't like he is now in baseball. Ted, one of the greatest names in the history. I don't know if he needed the money, but I don't think he was turning it down. He said he did it as a favor to Bob Short, who was in the office. Bob Short had hired him in Washington. He did it as a huge favor to Bob Short. Now, I'm saying in return for that favor, Bob may have, what if he said, Ted, I'll give you your salary, whatever the managers are making. They weren't making $100,000 a year, but I'll give you a couple of $100,000. Well, he's not going to turn that down. And he did like Bob Short. He really liked Bob Short. But
was he nice to you? Because I heard stories about Ted forever that he could
well, and of course he came in with that reputation. I was a bit intimidated.
Yeah.
I had never covered Major League Baseball, and so that first spring training, I was intimidated. How is this going to be? So I was just kind of laying back and seeing how it was going to be. But a couple of weeks in spring training, I split it with the spring training. So I wasn't there the whole time. Split it with the great Merle Herford, who had been the minor league baseball writer for years at the Morning News. But I thought he couldn't have been nicer. And that wasn't just to me, but that was all of the Texas media. And, man, you can't beat this. Now, this may change. We saw the Red Sox. They came down to Pompano Beach to play an exhibition game. And they pulled two buses, one for the media and one for the players that they brought. They had so much media in Boston down for spring training. So they pulled two buses up. It's a very small field, a spring training field, Pompano Beach. We're standing down the left field line, and we see the buses pull up. Now we're talking to Ted. He's out there doing some interviewing. We're interviewing Ted about this and that. Players get off. Some of the coaches, they're waving. Some of them run over and hug Ted. Coaches particularly. Can't even think who the manager was. But then the media bus, they start coming off. And Ted just screams, stops in the middle of the interview and screams, "I smell something." I said, oh, here we go now. Here we go. And there was one guy that he hated. I can't even think of his name.
Guy in Boston?
Yeah, one guy that he hated. And he gets off the bus and starts walking towards Ted. And and Ted, I really smell something now. And the guy, a little short guy, just came over. Ted wanted to say hello. And Ted went, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't know what else to do. So then they leave, and I said, well, there's a prime example. But then as the season starts, and now you're on the road, now you're around Ted a lot, teams losing, but there were moments, doing some screaming and kicking and yelling. But boy, with me, I really appreciated that too, because, Ted Williams is a legend, but he couldn't have been nicer to me. And I think most of the writers, and most of them are dead now, that were there in '72, I think most of the media would have said the same thing. Would say that, they Couldn't have been happier. Ted was very fair. He'd get a little hostile every once in a while, but nothing major on the thing. It went out of his way to help us.
How so?
He would say, somebody coming to town. He said, go talk, twins in town, go talk to Tony Oliva. He said, I think this is the purest swing I've ever seen. Somebody, me or somebody said, Ted, you're supposed to have had that. He went, this guy's better swing than mine. Well, he's giving you the damn story. Ted Williams says about Oliva, he's going to be here for 3 days in a 3-game series. Well, there you go. There's a story you can write right there on the thing. Ted Williams says this is the sweetest, just stuff like that. He didn't have to do that, but just stuff like that. And that's, a big help. Went out of his way to do stuff like that.
When you were a kid, Randy, the one thing that set you apart, other than your opinions and your wit and all that, you have the greatest voice ever, and you have nothing to do. That's just God doing whatever. Were you self-conscious about it when you were younger?
Never, and I didn't even realize I had this accent that I got. And people think, God, boy, you grew up in Texas. You are totally Texan. Well, not really. I was born in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Maybe that explains some of it. Anyway, I moved to Texas when I was 12, Odessa, Texas. I didn't even realize it. Until
make fun of it?
I get it. Oh, yeah, out on the road.
Okay.
Well, the players. And a couple of players still to this day. I know them. Randy Bob. Call me Randy Bob. Randy Bob.
Where did Randy Bob come from?
Well, it's a takeoff old Billy Bob.
Oh, yes. Okay,
Takeoff said, no, there's still got Tom Grieve will do it. So I'll see Tom Grieve. This is, hell, what is it, 50 years later? And hey, Randy Bob, let's go play golf. And so, but you know what? I'm thinking, I didn't even realize it was that voice. And I tell you what, after I got on the radio, Mac, I would be, I'd meet people and they'd go, you sound exactly like you do on the radio. And I'm thinking, if I was going to have a fake radio voice, if I was going to have a radio voice, you think it'd be this one? It'd be more like, hey, hello, everybody. It wouldn't be, this wouldn't be my radio voice. I go, no, yeah, that's my real voice.
When you were younger, you mentioned Tom Grieve. There's such a clear delineation now between players and media, right?
Yeah.
Also because of money.
Yeah.
And I know, but there's some NFL Network things and things like that.
Yeah.
When you were younger covering the Rangers, could you go out with players and drink with them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And did it all the time. And one story I tell about those days, this would be 74. Fergie Jenkins is with the Rangers first year. And we're out to 2 a.m. Bars closed at 1, but the Blue Goose next to the hotel stayed open to lock the doors. And if you're with a team, you can drink in there. About 2, we go home. It's a day game the next day. 1:30 game. It's pretty hot at the old Met in Minneapolis, Bloomington, Minnesota, actually. But Fergie's pitching. And David Fink at the Dallas Times-Herald beat me, and he said, Randy, could I ask you something? I said, sure, David. He said, I've got word that Fergie, and he said, I think this is absolutely true, that Fergie was out till 2 o'clock, and he's pitching today. And he said, I'm not asking you for confirmation, but I don't want to write it unless it's true. I said, it's true, David. He went, great. Are you going to write it? I said, David, I'm not going to write it because I was with him. And David Fink like to fell over. Then he started laughing. He went, well, I'm not going to write it either. And so, of course, and the great thing is, Fergie goes 7 innings, gives up 3 hits. Rangers win like 4-1 or something. So it became a really a non-story. Anyway, but that was, and sometime it got a little hairy, but most of the time, no. And now when Billy Martin was here, and there were scenes where if you were drinking and he walked in, he might want to harass a writer Tried that with James Walker one time.
Billy Martin did?
Billy Martin,
The stories I heard about Billy is that he was a renowned championship title belt drinker.
Well, I tell you what, I always said this about Billy. People say he's got a drinking problem. I said, no, it isn't a problem because he knows how to drink. But here was Billy's, and I'm a pretty good drinker myself, but Billy, tell you what, Billy was pretty well, he was pretty well loaded up on 3 beers. I mean, see, he got beyond, sober pretty quick, but then he never stopped drinking. See, and he was not a guy that was he did not have a stop sign when he was drinking, and that was the worst he got. So, but players and writers drinking in the same bars, maybe even going out to drink, certainly going to the horse track together. Me and Mickey Rivers traveled. We were at every horse track in every town.
Did you ever see Pete
on the
Rose
road.
Did you ever see Pete Rose?
No, I
never did. Really,
I never did see Pete. Of course, no. Now remember, we didn't go to we didn't go into Cincinnati. So, but I never did see Pete. But in spring training, the Yankees were right next door at Fort Lauderdale. And that's where I got to know Mickey originally, and a lot of the Lupinella, and they would all come to Pompano Park, the harness race.
Right.
And so I got to meet them over there. Whitey Ford, he was a coach then. And, guys, some great names.
Did Mickey Mantle come down?
I don't think we ever saw Mickey in that. At least he was probably down there, but we didn't see him at the track.
How did you understand Mickey Rivers? Any interview I've ever heard Mickey Rivers, you couldn't understand half anything that he'd say.
Well, as I said, neither one of us spoke English. So Mickey and I got along. I love Mickey. Oh, God, I love Mickey.
Who are your favorite guys to interview?
He would be one of them. I'd say all-time favorite would be Michael Irvin. I always said this. I've never seen a guy that could explain a situation. Now, Michael was in a lot of situations. He was in a lot, and like he had lines like, Randy, boy, I really regret some of the things I've done. I said, yeah, Michael, I understand that. He said, well, the main thing is, he said, my kids right now are 3 years old. When they get about 10, they're going to be on that computer. And he went, Google never dies. They're going to look Daddy up and all that stuff going to be there. And I said, that's a great line. And Google.
Oh, he's still using that.
Oh, yeah, Google never dies. But Michael could explain it as well as anybody on the thing. But I still put him down as.
Are there any guys you hated dealing with? Like just
a bunch. You didn't deal with them.
Or just avoid them.
Yeah, and sometimes you might have to do it, but there were guys that, when the Cowboys were going strong. Mark Tuinei. Mark Tuinei, I would try to talk to him. He wouldn't say 2 words to me. He wasn't mean about it. But he was like, yeah, no. Now, some of the other media people, he would talk to. So, no, for whatever reason, he never would. And then I tried to defend him. He died, unfortunately, and it was, obviously heroin was involved. I tried to defend him, and then people are going, well, he's defending a good friend of his. Well, he wasn't. I never played poker with him, some Hanson, Dale said, well, we played poker all the time together, and which they did. I was never involved in any of that, but there were people like that, without a doubt.
Of all the games you covered, because there's one that I can remember covering with you, and I can still see you in the press box. This is at Texas Stadium. The Cowboys lost the 2-7,000 playoff game against the Giants. It was Wade Phelps' first year. And you are disgusted.
Yeah.
And because you lived here for so long and you were around here for forever, did any of the losses that you covered, Rangers Game 6, Mavericks Game 5 in Miami, I think it was, the Cowboys, did any of them really bother you?
That Game 6, St. Louis. That blew it all out. Mainly because, I was in high school, Grand Prairie High School, 59, 60, and 61, when the Cowboys were born. Cowboys and the Dallas Texans came in. And so, I mean, it was like I'd seen the Cowboys from day one. And not covered it in the early days, but watched it. But that Ranger thing, that Game 6, oh God, had been the original beat man, and watched this thing through the ups and downs, let's say mostly downs, and then to watch this thing rise up, get to the World Series the year before, then certainly San Francisco's pitching wasn't even any doubt. I mean, San Francisco's pitching was so good. Rangers never had a prayer. Won, I guess, ousted in 5 games. But then the next year you're going, hey, they can beat this St. Louis bunch. And then the Game 5, of course, when the Dutch oven, Derek Holland pitches this, and Washington's out there. Don't screw. Ron just kind of talked him through that performance right from the first inning, and Ron was so involved in it. And it had a Game 5, and then Game 6 is going exactly the way you want it. I still will not watch that game.
You won't really?
Oh, no. And it comes up certainly now on the baseball channel because they're having to, during this whatever it is, lockout, they can't do a lot of stuff, so they're replaying games. Oh, I bet that game's come up. But since that Game 6, 2011, I bet that game's come up 15 times, either on ESPN or the baseball. And I will not watch it.
All right, last thing I'll ask you. There's a lot of people who still want to get into sports media.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. A lot of same reasons we did.
Dang right.
What advice would you give them?
Tough right now, Mac. Now, when I was coming up, and God, that was Stone Age back, but Stone Age, early mid-60s, you could get a sports writing job. You could get a foundation job. I went to Port Arthur. Morning News sent me to Port Arthur when I just turned 22. I got that experience. You could get that job. You could go to Abilene. There were all these towns, Big Spring, Tyler, all these towns had daily newspapers.
How much did they pay you at Port Arthur? Do you remember?
Port Arthur, $105 a week.
Okay.
And by the way, Abilene, I had friends that went to Abilene, $65 a week. And they all want to come to Port Arthur for paying
for the big money.
Yeah. But I mean, you could have, boy, that's disappeared now. And I don't, where the newspaper business is, I never tell anybody not to pursue their dream. But where the newspaper business is right now, I came up, all guys of my ilk, we were in the golden age of newspaper. The morning news, to be there and watch that thing explode in the late 70s, and suddenly we had budget, space, we had everything you want. We had staff, and then when I moved to the Star-Telegram, it was the same way. And the great thing is the morning news blew it out. They were in the war with the Times Herald. Times Herald folds. The morning news kind of keeps it up, and then the morning news decides they're going to come into Arlington, which was the Star-Telegram's territory. And that's one of the reasons I got the call from the Star-Telegram. And I go over there, the Star-Telegram was putting out. I knew all the guys. I knew it was a good paper. And they're putting out a damn good paper. And you had the morning news and the Star-Telegram. There was, I don't think, any market in the country. And we're unique. We got 2 cities. But there was no, New York, Boston, no market in the country was putting out 2, because I was traveling the country, seeing all that, or either I'm on sportswriters.com on the internet, and I'm reading other papers. But no city in the country had 2 newspapers like the Morning News and the Star-Telegram. there for about 10 years. I'm right in the middle of it. I'm benefiting from it. And God, how lucky are you? And then when I got out, things started. Even sports talk radio, 3 stations blowing it out in this market. Who ever heard of that? 3 sports talk stations. We're all benefiting. Money, the whole thing. And these were jobs, sports writing jobs and radio jobs were not jobs that were once paid a lot. Back in the day, they were great jobs and you could get one, but they weren't paying a lot. Suddenly that changed too. So am I thankful? People say, would you like to be 50 years old? And, back in the mix, sports writing, said, no, it's not the same. I mean, it'll never be, I don't want to say never, but you can't see it in the newspaper business or the radio business ever going through what we went through there for about a 30-year period. And, just the luck to be right in the middle of when it started and when it ended, the golden era of media, sports media in this market, but I think anywhere in the United States, because what's happening in our market, particularly with newspapers, it's happening all over the country. Yeah, without a deal. But so lucky, really lucky. So I'll take being 79 and roll on because I got to be in the best part of it.